Welcome to Hannity. We're witnessing in this country right now, right before your eyes, a total miscarriage of justice at the highest court in the land. There is no due process, no presumption of innocence, no burden of proof. And as we speak, you have the Democratic Party, the left in America, the media in America, all their friends are literally saying guilt by accusation and trying to destroy the character, career, reputation of Judge Brett Kavanaugh based on what is decades-old, uncorroborated allegations. Now, ambiguous claims we have here. Kavanaugh himself is categorically refuting it under oath, and the so-called witnesses categorically denied. Now, of course, this coordinated effort to take down Judge Kavanaugh, we're going to show you tonight, is nothing new from the Democratic Party. There is good reason to be skeptical, as serious as these allegations are, and we have said from the beginning to take them seriously. We're going to have tonight a Hannity history lesson on how Democrats, the left in this country, use identity politics every 2 years, every 4 years to gain an electoral advantage, all while destroying the reputation of their opponents in the process. The tactics of the left should disgust every rational thinking American who loves and cares about this country, our core values. This isn't about Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative tonight. We'll also discuss the controversy surrounding the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. The president should under no circumstances fire this beleaguered bureaucrat. We're going to explain that and so much more. This is a very important breaking news opening monologue. Tonight, Judge Brett Kavanaugh is fighting back and standing up for his good name and his reputation, and he's demanding a fair process. He says he won't be intimidated. After days of negotiations with the Senate Judiciary Committee, Professor Christine Ford has now agreed to testify about the allegations she made against Judge Kavanaugh. Let me be perfectly clear. These are serious allegations. I've said it many times. Professor Ford deserves to be heard. And those allegations and accusations should be taken seriously. And this coming Thursday, you, the American people, will be able to hear from both Professor Ford and Judge Kavanaugh in an open setting. Now, Chairman Grassley of the Senate Judiciary Committee, he was right to hold this hearing, and the Republicans have been and are being extremely fair and accommodating, and they're taking these allegations seriously. But tonight we need to step back, and we need to remember what we're talking about here. These are 35-year-old sexual misconduct allegations made by Professor Ford to congressional Democrats. Now, the claims date back to when Ford and Kavanaugh were in high school. Senator Dianne Feinstein, she was aware of Professor Ford's allegations since July. She sat on them. She kept them a secret until after Kavanaugh's public hearing and after lengthy meetings with Judge Kavanaugh. In fact, Dianne Feinstein refused to give Senate Republicans, her colleagues, the full unredacted letter where the accusations were first made back in July until today. Now, Professor Ford cannot remember a date or location of the alleged incident. The four witnesses that Ford herself listed to corroborate her claims, they are all now on record denying what Ford is alleging. And just a short time ago, Judge Kavanaugh sat down with our own Martha McCallum and categorically refuted these claims once again. Let's take a look.
I may have met her. We did not travel in the same social circles. She was not a friend, not someone I knew.
You don't remember ever being at parties with her, ever?
I do not. And this is an allegation about a party in the summer of 1982 at a house near Connecticut Avenue and East-West Highway with 5 people present. I was never at any such party. The other people who are alleged to be present have said they do not remember any such party. A woman who was present, another woman who was present, who is Dr. Ford's lifelong friend, has said she doesn't know me and never remembers being at a party with me at any time in her life.
All right, tonight, Kavanaugh is now facing one more allegation because over the weekend, the New Yorker, well, they brought up another decades-old claim against Kavanaugh. In this case, a woman named Deborah Ramirez. She's claiming that in the 1980s, again, when he was a freshman in college, that Kavanaugh exposed himself at to her at a drunken college party at Yale University. Ramirez herself wasn't totally sure if Kavanaugh was the perpetrator. According to the New Yorker, she became, quote, quickly inebriated at the party, her words. She told the New Yorker that she was, quote, foggy and slurring her words. And she even acknowledged that she has significant memory gaps from that evening. Now, the New York Times, well, they spent over a week trying to corroborate her story, talking to dozens of people. And the Times said this, quote, they have interviewed several dozen people over the past week in an attempt to corroborate her story. They could find no one with firsthand knowledge. Ms. Ramirez herself contacted former Yale classmates asking if they recalled the incident and told some of them that she could not be certain Mr. Kavanaugh was the one who exposed himself. And those who Ramirez listed as witnesses in yet another case here, well, to the indecent charges, well, they're all flatly denying. And this is what they said. We can say with confidence that if the incident Debbie alleges ever occurred, we would have seen or heard about it. We did not. The behavior that she describes would be completely out of character for Brett. In addition, some of us knew Debbie long after Yale. She never described this incident until Brett's Supreme Court nomination was pending. The New Yorker also interviewed Ramirez's best friend at the time of the alleged incident, and she's also denying any knowledge of her claims. And she said, quote, this is a woman I was best friends with. We shared intimate details of our lives. I was never told this story by her or by anyone else. It never came up. I didn't see it. I never heard of it happening. Now, Judge Kavanaugh also denied emphatically these decades-old charges. In a statement, he wrote, quote, well, these are smears, pure and simple, and they debase our public discourse, but they are also a threat to any man or woman who wishes to serve our country. Such grotesque and obvious character assassination, if allowed to succeed, will dissuade competent and good people of all political persuasions from service. As I told the committee during my hearing, a federal judge must be independent, not swayed by public or political pressure. That is the kind of judge I will always be. I will not be intimidated into withdrawing from this process. The coordinated effort to destroy my good name will not drive me out. The vile threats of violence against my family will not drive me out. The last-minute character assassination will not succeed. And tonight, Kavanaugh once again denied these charges in his interview with Martha. Let's take a look.
I never did any such thing. Never did any such thing. The other people alleged to be there don't recall any such thing. If such a thing had happened, it would have been the talk of campus. The women I knew in college and the men I knew in college says it's inconceivable that I could have done such a thing. And the New York Times has reported that just last week, the person making the accusation was calling other classmates saying she was not sure that I had done this. Again, just asking for a fair process where I can be heard and I can defend my integrity.
And during this interview, he took it even a step further. Let's watch this.
People generally in high school, I think all of us have probably done things we look back on in high school and regret or cringe a bit. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about an allegation of sexual assault. I've never sexually assaulted anyone. I did not have sexual intercourse or anything close to sexual intercourse in high school or for many years thereafter. And the girls from the schools I went to and I were friends.
So you're saying that through all these years that are in question, you were a virgin?
That's correct.
Never had sexual intercourse with anyone in high school?
Correct.
And through what years in college, since we're probing into your personal life here?
Many years after. I'll leave it at that. Many years after.
Then Brett Kavanaugh went on to defend his character as a young student at Yale. Watch this.
Was there ever a time that you drank so much that you couldn't remember what happened the night before?
No. That never happened.
You never said to anyone, I don't remember anything about last night?
No. That did not happen.
Did you ever have any sense that any kind of the description of the behavior that I just described with these, women being taken into rooms and raped or having sex with a number of men, consensual or otherwise, that was going on at the parties that you were at?
I never saw any such thing. Any such thing. I certainly never participated in any such thing, but I never saw or heard of any such thing. And I was focused on trying to be number one in my class in being captain of the varsity basketball team, in doing my service projects, going to church. The vast majority of the time I spent in high school was studying or focused on sports and being a good friend to the boys and the girls that I was friends with. We have these great lifelong friendships.
Now, despite all of these charges, Judge Kavanaugh says he will not be quiet. He is vowing not to be intimidated into withdrawing his nomination. And while Judge Kavanaugh is standing firm, rightly demanding a fair process, it is so important to remember the toll that it also takes on a family. Again, where's the presumption of innocence? Let's take a look.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult to have these conversations with your children, which we've had to have, some broader terms for our youngest, but they know Brett and they know the truth. And we told them at the very beginning of this process, this will be not fun sometimes. You're going to hear things that people feel strongly, and you need to know that, and just remember, you know your dad.
Now, while President Trump, he is standing by his nominee tonight, and he predicted earlier today that, in fact, he will be confirmed. Let's take a look at this.
It would be sad indeed if something happened to reroute that. This is a fine man, and we certainly hope he's going to be confirmed, and quickly. His family has suffered. His family has suffered. What's going on is not something that should happen. Brett Kavanaugh is an absolute outstanding person. Hopefully, he will be confirmed quickly.
Now, this all comes as one false smear about Judge Kavanaugh has officially been debunked. The mainstream media, Democrats, were gleefully spreading a rumor that female students were coached by a law professor on how to dress in an outgoing way when they were interviewing with Judge Kavanaugh, a rumor that the professor is completely denying. Now, despite everything we just showed you, and before any public testimony, there are people in this country, this should not be political, Democrats, people on the left, they have already convicted Judge Kavanaugh. And according to them, he has no presumption of innocence, no right to be heard, no reason to be believed, no due process. You know, actually, there are lawmakers that are throwing law out the window and claiming his guilt by accusation. This should not happen in this country. Take a look.
The Senate shouldn't simply rely on hearing two conflicting accounts and decide, well, we're okay with not knowing, we're okay with the fact that we might be putting someone who committed attempted rape on the Supreme Court of the United States.
I believe her. Listen, first of all, anybody who comes forward at this point to be prepared to testify in the United States Senate against someone who is being nominated to one of the most powerful positions in the United States government, that takes an extraordinary amount of courage.
Not only do women like Dr. Ford, who bravely comes forward, need to be heard, but they need to be believed. They need to be believed. I just want to say to the men of this country, just shut up and step up. Do the right thing.
Let me just say right at the outset, I believe Dr. Ford. I believe the survivor here. There's every reason to believe her. She has come forward courageously and bravely.
I believe her. I stand with her. And
do you hope she shows up on Monday? Do you hope that she testifies?
I don't think she should be bullied into this scenario where it's a he said, she said. It's a sham hearing. And I don't think she should participate in it.
I believe Professor Ford. I think she's credible, and I think when the investigation is finished and when she testifies and Judge Kavanaugh testifies, I think a majority of senators will find her credible, and I never thought Kavanaugh should get appointed.
No presumption of innocence. Now, at the very same time, all the people you're watching here, we have a case not 36, 7, or 5 or 4 years ago where Keith Ellison, the number 2 person, the number 2 guy at the DNC, has been accused of repeated physical and emotional abuse. And the DNC has smeared and slandered and ignored the person making that allegation. That's back in August this year. So what you're watching is a Democratic Party playing politics, sadly exploiting a sexual conduct allegation, accusation, that's it, for political gain, jumping to conclusions, rushing to judgment. Now, these are serious allegations, and as I've said, we should hear from the accuser. But tonight, every American, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, this is why you need a healthy dose of skepticism. Let me tell you why. The attorney representing Professor Ford, her name is Deborah Katz, well, has views on sexual assault that have been extraordinarily political and inconsistent at best. For example, she said this about Paula Jones. Nobody in the media reports it. Now, Paula Jones' suit is very, very, very weak, and she alleged one incident that took place at a hotel room that by her own testimony lasted 10 to 12 minutes. She suffered no repercussions in the workplace. She then said of Jones' accusations, quote, clearly a one-time incident that took place in 10 to 12 minutes, and she was not forced to have sex. She left of her own volition. The courts increasingly are finding that is not enough to create a sexually hostile work environment claim. And she also defended creepy Senator Al Franken, quote, context is relevant. He did not do this as a member of the U.S. Senate. Yeah, he did. And by the way, he did this in his capacity of someone who is still functioning as an entertainer. Clearly, Professor Ford's attorney has a left-wing, radical, inconsistent political agenda. And the Daily Caller even uncovered back in 2017, the same attorney said she vowed to resist President Trump. We've got the tape. Here it is.
Finally over the finish line, the new Attorney General this morning grateful to the colleagues who fought for him.
I can't express how appreciative I am for those of you who stood by me during this difficult time.
We will persist. It was a bitter feud to the very end.
We're going to fight back. We are going to resist. We will not be silent.
We're going to fight back. We're going to resist. And now we're also learning that Professor Ford is adding one more person to his legal team, an attorney named Michael Vromwich. He's the lawyer currently representing fired FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Now, this brings us to our Hannity history lesson surrounding the Democratic playbook. Now, every 2 to 4 years in politics, every election cycle, Democrats use the politics of personal destruction to literally maim the character of their political opponents, even if it means lying in the process. They demonize all conservatives. There's not a conservative I know that has not been through this. In fact, every 4 years, every 2 years, Republicans are racist, sexist, misogynistic, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic. Oh, they want dirty air and water, and they want to kill your children and throw Granny over a cliff. Now, the left has also rushed to judgment in the wake of other major events. They've been wrong. On this program, we've been right. We didn't rush to judgment in the Duke lacrosse case. Remember when the media falsely accused Richard Jewell, the Summer Olympics bombing? Remember? Because they said, oh, he fit the profile of a lone bomber because he lived with his mother. Richard Jewell was listening to my radio show. I was a local host in Atlanta at the time. He once thanked me for being the only one not to rush to judgment. Remember the rush to judgment in Ferguson, in Missouri? Do you remember the rush to judgment in Baltimore with Freddie Gray? Remember when Obama said the Cambridge police acted stupidly? You know, we have on this program adopted the we will not rush to judgment. We will wait. We will see. In the case of the Duke lacrosse kids, I went to meet with their parents. In the case of Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman, I met with George Zimmerman's attorney and George Zimmerman. Asked him tough questions. And you see it now every time there's a Supreme Court nominee, well, and it happens to be a president that's Republican that appoints them. We saw it all the time. Judge Bork, we saw it with Clarence Thomas. Politically, remember 2012? Mitt Romney was sexist. He had binders full of women's resumes. And remember, they turned his efforts to hire women into an attack about him being a sexist. Mitt Romney was not. Democrats smeared Romney. Remember, they falsely accused him. Remember Harry Reid of being a tax cheat? And then after they won the election, he had no regrets about spreading these lies, these false attacks. This happens. This is why Americans have a duty to be skeptical, because the media, the left wing, have been wrong. It's in their playbook. We see it every 2 years, every 4 years, every Supreme Court nominee, and every big high-profile case that they politicize. Here's a look at Harry Reid.
Let him prove that he has paid taxes, because he hasn't. No, I don't regret that at all. The Koch brothers, no one would help me. They were afraid the Koch brothers would go after them. So I did it on my own.
So no regrets about Mitt Romney, about the Koch brothers. Some people have even called it McCarthyite.
Well, they call it whatever they want. Romney didn't win, did he?
I regret telling a total lie and smearing somebody. From Mitt Romney to Robert Bork to Clarence Thomas to George Bush. Frankly, every conservative I know that has been forced at some point in their life to deal with these baseless smears, attacks, character assassination. Now, the most often used character assassination in the Democratic playbook is to call Republicans racist. It happens every election season. Take a look.
Many Republicans talk in coded racial language about takers and losers. They demonize President Obama and encourage the ugliest impulses of the paranoid fringe.
If you accept the support of Klan sympathizers before you are president, you will accept their support after you're president.
He's going to let the big banks once again write their own rules. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains.
It's wrong what the leader of the Republican Party and this Congress are doing in blocking an accurate census because they don't want to count everyone that they don't think they can count on.
They are in favor of affirmative action if you can dunk the basketball or sink a three-point shot. But they're not in favor of it if you merely have the potential to be a leader in your community and bring people together. Don't tell me we've got a colorblind society.
June 7, 1998, in Texas, my father was killed. He was beaten, chained, and then dragged 3 miles to his death, all because he was black. So when Governor George W. Bush refused to support hate crimes legislation, it was like my father was killed all over again.
When you don't vote, you let another church explode. When you don't vote, you allow another cross to burn.
Real smears, real character assassination, and it happens predictably every election season, and it happens with Supreme Court nominees. This is gutter politics at its worst, and sadly, we're going to see more and more of these tactics as we now march, 43 days or so towards the midterms. We're going to have a lot more on this in a moment. But first, breaking today, it also appears the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is hanging on to his job, at least for now, after the New York Times issued a report accusing Rod Rosenstein, and they're sticking by it, of plotting to secretly record President Trump and planning to rally cabinet officials and invoke the 25th Amendment. Rumors spread that Rosenstein might be out of a job. That was going on all morning this morning. Tonight, Rod Rosenstein has been in communication with the president, and apparently they will be meeting on Thursday. We'll have a lot more on that in a minute. Joining us now first with this developing situation and much more is South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator, I can give you chapter and verse.
That was hard to sit through.
What's that?
That was hard to listen to.
Well,
that was really tough.
The problem is these are real people that are being
That's
called
true.
racist, sexist,
Absolutely.
misogynist.
Remember John McCain? John Lewis said that John McCain's campaign reminded him of George Wallace's campaign.
That's another one. And this is the problem. These are real lives that get destroyed here. What Kennedy said about Robert Bork was despicable and disgusting. What was done to Clarence Thomas was another last-minute smear.
They tried it with Alito. They tried it with Alito.
Yep. What do you make of this now that we've had time? There's not a single person in the case of Professor Ford that she mentioned that was there that has corroborated the story. And the same thing with Ms. Ramirez.
Well, number one, to the Democrats, they knew about this since July the 30th. They chose to do nothing about it. For them to complain about the process is like an arsonist complaining about a fire. The allegations against Judge Kavanaugh are collapsing. This has been the worst low point in the Senate for me, and that's saying a lot. I never thought it would get this bad. We're going to have a hearing Thursday and have a vote soon thereafter, and I look forward to supporting this good man. The takeaway for me, Sean, is that when it comes to Donald Trump, there are no boundaries, there are no rules. Whatever you need to do to destroy him or his agenda is okay, and that's very sad.
You know, Senator, we do have a serious allegation, and I've said let everybody be heard, and I know you have said the same.
Yeah.
A month ago,
we are.
The girlfriend of Keith Ellison, number 2 at the DNC, one is running for Attorney General in Minnesota, repeated physical and emotional abuse.
Yeah.
The reason I say this is selective moral outrage, a lot of the people we're talking about right now haven't uttered a word.
Right.
So it's only guilt by accusation if you're a conservative or a Republican or appointed by a Republican.
Well, Democrats are willing to believe anything about a Trump nominee. They didn't believe anything about President Clinton, who had a long history of this. Here's what I can tell you. This man, Judge Kavanaugh, has been in very responsible jobs for well over 20 years. Not one woman has ever come forward to say they acted inappropriately in the workplace, that he used his power in an untoward way. These allegations are not about sex, they're about power. You don't become a serial rapist for a couple of years and hang it up. That's the garbage of all garbage coming from the Hannity camp. So here's what I think will happen. Nobody in their right mind is going to deny him a seat on the Supreme Court based on allegations 35 years old, when everybody at the high school party says they don't know what the lady is talking about, Dr. Ford, and this second allegation is not even worthy of talking about. So I hope every Republican will be fair to Judge Kavanaugh, listen to what Miss Dr. Ford says, and render a good decision here. If he is denied a seat on the Supreme Court based on 35-year-old allegations that are uncorroborated, who in the world will come forward in the future to be a judge? There's a lot at stake here.
Senator, I couldn't get 220 people ever stand up for me, to be honest. He said 220 people.
I know your golf buddies, and they would not be there.
No, they'd all yeah, that's true, actually.
They would not be there.
You know, I love when people come on my show and just trash me. I have guests here that we're going to introduce in a minute. I think that's true. He said 220 people, but they went above.
Yeah. Amen.
These are women that knew him in high school, college, law school, the Bush administration, law clerks of his.
Right.
Here's my question. Many of your colleagues, when they say, I believe her,
right,
do they believe in the presumption of innocence anymore?
No, they just want to get Trump. There's no way you can say that an allegation this old, not specific to time and place, when everybody else supposedly at the party said it didn't happen, that you can render a conclusion in the favor of one person over the other. You just want an outcome. This is about outcome politics. Whatever it takes to stop Trump, we'll do. Whatever we have to say about Kavanaugh to stop him, we'll say. It's been disgusting. They've had this allegation since July. They're playing politics with it. There's been delay and deception, and it won't work. It's going to blow up in their face.
Let me ask you one final question. I'd be negligent if I didn't ask you about Rod Rosenstein and the New York Times report. They are standing by that report from last Friday.
Right.
He will be meeting with the president. I honestly think it's a setup. And I think that the president should not be the one firing Rod Rosenstein.
Right.
And I have been saying he should be fired and should go away a long time. I think it's a setup. And my question to you is, well, where's Jeff Sessions? That would be his department, his job. What is your take? What should happen, Senator?
Well, two things. I think Rosenstein should have appointed a special counsel a long time ago to look at DOJ and FBI abuses regarding the Clinton email scandal and the early stages of the Russian investigation. I think he's let us all down there. Secondly, there were 7 people in a room sometime after the election that were trying to wire the president and take him down, basically, take the law in their own hands. I believe that Rosenstein was probably being sarcastic. If he was really part of it, he should be fired. But I don't trust McCabe and Page as far as I could throw them. So if I were
President Trump... But he's also
Trump,
conflicted, Senator.
Yes, he is. He should not be overseeing the investigation of the FISA warrant because he was a part of the FISA warrant. He shouldn't be overseeing this investigation because he was in the meeting himself. I believe Rosenstein until I have reason otherwise, but if I were the president, I would make sure that I talked to him before I made that decision.
All right, Lindsey Graham, Senator, we have a lot more to get to, but we appreciate you taking time tonight. Here with more reaction.
I'll be back.
Author of the #1 New York Times best-selling book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals. It's an awesome book. The Case Against the Anti-Trump Conspiracy. She's the host of Justice right here on the Fox News channel. Judge Jeanine Pirro, Fox News contributor. Andy McCarthy, a powerful column today. And Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi. Let me start with both of you. You're both in politics. Number one, we all know every conservative gets smeared. What's your reaction to all this, and especially based on all the people saying that were mentioned? I never knew this. I never heard this.
Well, Sean, not only am I in politics, I'm an attorney, and I'm a prosecutor my entire career for over 2 decades before I was Attorney General. So not only does the left, they don't believe in the rule of law, they want to end the law by doing this to a man of great integrity. I know him. I know Brett Kavanaugh. I've known him a couple years. I got to know him. I hired his former law clerk, who was also an Alito clerk, who thinks the world of him. And that's how I got to be friends with Brett on a personal level. This is a good man. I've done a national commercial for him, for the PAC, promoting his confirmation. And his wife, thank goodness he is a strong wife, and thank goodness he is
to go through this crap?
Absolutely nobody, and that's the strongest point he made. If he doesn't stand up and go through this and fight this, what good person would ever want to run for political office? We've all been attacked, but not like that. I mean, that's despicable what they're trying to do with 2 young daughters to this good, solid man.
The stories are falling apart, Judge. The people that they are saying are at these alleged incidents are all contradicting. You know, and all of us drank too much in college, although, you know, I was 17, 10 to bar. I was a junior in high school. But this new woman, Ms. Ramirez, says I was inebriated, gaps in memory, calling, as the New York Times even said, calling people, do you remember, because I'm not sure.
Right, exactly. Look, it is clear what's going on here, Sean, and we've run for office, and I was a prosecutor, I run DA's office.
Oh, I can mention a particular New York Post cover of you.
The Constitution, I have many covers, but the Constitution, it applies to criminals, murderers, but it doesn't apply to a man who has dedicated his life to the pursuit of justice, a man who no woman in the last, I don't know how many decades, have said a bad word about him. And now all of a sudden we've got the left that is using the rules of Saul Alinsky, chaos and unruliness, to bring socialism and anarchy to this country. I'm going to ask one question, Sean. I'd like to know how many United States senators are willing to change the standards of justice against them to accusation without corroboration. And I guarantee you, if we start and go down that road, things will change.
Andy, you had a very powerful column today. I thought you and Rush made 2 similar but different points. You say that they cannot let these delay tactics. Dianne Feinstein had this back in July. You say they should not delay the Judiciary Committee's hearing or turn it into even more of a farce. They risk that. Rush said, confirm Kavanaugh or kiss the midterms goodbye. That's a powerful statement. And I agree with it.
Well, I agree with it, Sean. You know, look, I think there's 2 things going on here. Number one, with respect to Brett Kavanaugh's particular nomination, they're obviously trying to do everything they can to delay. These accusations were brought out of time and an abuse of the process to try to push it beyond the midterms so that they can try to defeat this nomination in the hope of, you know, swinging the Senate and trying to have the votes to beat him. But I think in the greater context, what's happening here is this is a shot across the bow at everybody on the right, even every moderate in America who doesn't follow the radical left agenda, that this is what they will do to you if you try to crash the party. They will stoop to
I went
any
through a history
level
lesson, and I've got a lot more
to destroy
tape.
people.
Yeah, Pam.
We've all been attacked. We've all been attacked in our careers, all of us. But they're trying to eviscerate.
Racist, if you say that they are a misogynist, if you say they committed sexual assault.
Right. They are trying to eviscerate a good human being, a man who has devoted his entire life to public service. Inexcusable.
And you know what? This guy, Hannity, he's another doozy. You know, he accuses Stormy's attorney.
He mentioned gang rape.
Accuses judge on the Circuit Court of Appeals, one on the Supreme Court of gang rape. Mr. Hannity, that is slander per se. That is the kind of accusation against a judge that should bring you before the grievance committee, but nothing's going to happen.
Last word. It goes to Andy McCarthy.
End the kangaroo court. Have a vote.
Have the vote.
Have the vote.
Where will Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski go?
Exactly. They better go with us. They better go with Judge Kavanaugh.
You know what? They can talk all they want, but if they're true to the Constitution, they'll vote for this man.
They better.
The stories are falling apart, but I want everybody to be heard. You know what? The people that have been fair here have been conservatives. The people that rush to judgment are on the left, just like in all those other high-profile cases. Thank you all for being with us. When we come back, Ed Henry, live report from Washington. Also, 3 women who know Brett Kavanaugh vouch for his character. Later, we'll also have a pretty big announcement. Stay with us. There's a new study out of Yale. 3 researchers looked into the question, how many people live in this country illegally? The number you hear is usually around 11 million. No one really knows. Well, their conclusion, which has been disputed by some, is that it's at least 22 million. It's double what we say it is. True or not, it's clearly a lot more than we're pretending. How did we get here exactly? Reihan Salam is a columnist. He's the author of a brand new book out tomorrow called Melting Pot, or Civil War, a son of immigrants makes the case against open borders. One of the smartest things I've read in a very long time, and he joins us tonight. Reihan, thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So you meditated on this question for a long time, and the question isn't how many millions or tens of millions of people are here illegally. The question really is, how did we get here? How does this happen?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that it can't possibly be just the Democrats, right? It's also Republicans who decided that this was useful for their purposes. It was Republicans who were more interested in the interests of employers than of workers. You've got Democrats and Republicans who feel this way, both of whom work together to see to it that you do not have a more worker-friendly immigration and economic policy across the board. And that has been a huge dereliction on the part of America's elites.
So one of the reasons I was so excited to get your book, which I was reading this afternoon, is that you are, I hope, starting a debate about this question. No matter what side readers are on, at least there will be a conversation, a rational one, not about race, but about the economic effects of immigration on the country. Why haven't we had that conversation?
Well, you know, it's the economic effects, but also it's kind of a core idea of conservatism. The idea that we care not just about the here and now, we care about the future.
Right.
We care not just about the immigrant and what kind of work they can do, but about the children and grandchildren of the immigrant, right? So what we have right now is a situation where we are in a combustible state, where people are trying to turn one kind of American against another. You have people saying, oh, these older people in middle America, they just don't get it, you know, and then other saying that, hey, you know, we need to replace them essentially with an entirely new people. They need to be more enlightened. They need to get with the program or get the hell out. And that elite attitude of contempt for ordinary working Americans, some of whom, by the way, are themselves immigrants or the children of immigrants, is incredibly toxic and has fueled this legitimate question about whether or not our elites think of themselves as American elites or whether or not they're in fact opposed to the interests of the country. Exactly. And I find it pretty terrifying that we've gotten to the point where elites have almost seceded from the country that has actually enabled them to build their wealth and power.
Like the corporations they serve, they are multinational. The passport is just a way to get, it doesn't have any meaning. Nationality doesn't mean, do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
They're in effect owned by sovereign wealth funds too, just like the companies
Exactly,
they
but
work for.
here's the thing, who actually suffers because of that? A lot of the time the people who suffer are these second generation children of immigrants who are themselves working class. And the thing is that the same government, the same elite that is not looking after the interests of older stock Americans, later generation Americans, is also saying these second generation Americans who maybe they're having a tough time. They're maybe flawed. You say, oh, we'll just replace you with a new round, right? I mean, it's this kind of incredible attitude.
Read the book. It's worth it. Reihan Salam, thank you very much. Congrats on this.
Thank you very much, Tucker.
Brett Kavanaugh and his wife just gave an exclusive interview to our friend Martha McCallum here at Fox. Some of the highlights. Martha's here to tell us what it was like to do it after the break. Brett Kavanaugh and his wife Ashley appeared on The Story with Martha McCallum just an hour ago.
On the show, he categorically denied all allegations of sexual misconduct levied against him. Watch.
I've never sexually assaulted anyone, not in high school, not ever. I've always treated women with dignity and respect. Listen to the people who've known me best through my whole life. The women who've known me since high school, the 65 who overnight signed a letter from high school saying I always treated them with dignity and respect.
Kavanaugh's wife, of course, came to the defense of her husband as well.
I know Brett. I've known him for 17 years, and this is not at all character. It's really hard to believe. He's decent, he's kind, he's good. I know his heart. This is not consistent with Brett.
Martha McCallum on our set tonight. They look in pain, both of them.
You know what? Watching it again, this was really hard for them. Really hard for them. And I felt like they were both kind of just tamping down the tears. They were this close to crying. I think this is obviously incredibly emotional and devastating for them. I think they thought, and we all thought, that first day at the hearing when Democrats tried to shut down the whole hearing, that it couldn't really get any worse than that. And then they think they're all the way through, and suddenly these accusations start coming out of the woodwork, and I think it would wreak havoc on anybody. They seem very solid together and very united in the effort to, because I said to them, you know, at some point don't you just say, like, forget it, it's not worth it anymore, it's too painful. But that is not an option.
For a job that pays, you know, less than the average lawyer makes in town. You asked them about their girls, their family. Here was the response of Mrs. Kavanaugh.
It's very difficult to have these conversations with your children, which we've had to have, some broader terms for our youngest, but they know Brett and they know the truth. And we told them at the very beginning of this process, this will be not fun sometimes. You're going to hear things that people feel strongly, and you need to know that, and just remember, you know your dad.
Boy, I bet their girls are not prepared for this, though.
No, I mean, how could they be? You can imagine at their age, they're like teens, 12, 10, in that age range, and it's obviously, I'm sure it's devastating for them. And to have to explain, I asked him specifically point blank about all of the allegations, and we talked about them in very specific graphic terms. I can't imagine what it's like to have to kind of frame that, as she said, broadly for their younger child. But, she also said they know their dad. And remember, even in the beginning when he got roughed up in that first day, he said his daughter came down and gave him a hug that night. So I think he needs a lot of hugs to get through this period. But, I mean, the allegations are what they are. He's going to face this on Thursday. Christine Ford will be heard from. She'll have her moment to speak, to make her peace. But there's no doubt that this has been extraordinarily difficult for them, especially the new allegations over the weekend.
When Clarence Thomas was accused of inappropriate behavior in 1991, he made a decision that he was going to fight back in a very tough way. Absolutely. I mean, he was not going to go down. Do you think Kavanaugh has made that decision?
Kavanaugh was not in Clarence Thomas fighting shape today. I'll say that. And I played that clip from Clarence Thomas's when he just basically leveled the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's so powerful. That is not the frame of mind that Brett Kavanaugh appeared to be in today. He may be in that mood on Thursday. I even asked him several times, you say that this is all false, so what do you think is behind this? Where do you think this is coming from?
Great
question. Is there
question.
some kind of political vendetta against you that's being played out? And we all know some of the corners where that could possibly be coming from. He did not want to go there at all. Doesn't want to conjecture about any of that. And Clarence Thomas clearly called it what he thought it was, a high-tech lynching, and he felt that the Senate Judiciary Committee had sunk to such lows to entertain some of the accusations against him that they entertained. That was his feeling, and he persevered. So whether or not we'll see some of that fire in Brett Kavanaugh come Thursday, we'll see.
He's going to need it. Martha McCallum, congrats on that interview.
Oh, thanks, Tucker. Good to see you.
Wow. We'll sum it up after the break.